to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker. Joining me as always, as we're finally done our previews of all 32 NHL teams. And Justin, how does it feel to know that we've given our predictions and we're going to be spot on in all those predictions throughout the entire year?
Yeah, it feels fantastic to know that I'm always right about every team every year. And quite frankly, if you want to pay me $100, I will gladly tell you who the Stanley Cup winner is going to be this year.
Yeah, last year, I think it was our preview of the Philadelphia Flyers that I said that they were a lock for the playoffs. Was that last year or was that the year before?
That was last year.
Yeah, and I think the problem was that my abilities got a little mixed up. It was actually supposed to be for this year, the year where nobody thinks they're going to make the playoffs.
Oh yeah,
that they're 5-2-2. Good for them. Definitely the luckiest team thus far, as far as all the Carter Hart stood on his head. And I don't know. It's between Philadelphia and Winnipeg. Which team has leaned on their goalie more heavily, Winnipeg or Philadelphia? I'm not sure.
Oh, I'll go Winnipeg all day. But
yeah. Connor Hellebuyck has held them in there. That's for sure. Okay, so on today's show, we are going to talk about unmet expectations. We just did our previews, and now it's time to just go, let's throw those out the window because to some respect, some of these teams that we thought were, going to be struggling, they've done really well and vice versa. And I think on today's show, we're going to talk about those teams that have struggled out of the gate. And I'm not talking Arizona. I'm not talking about San Jose or Anaheim. We knew that those teams were bailing for the bottom. They were destined to be at the bottom of the standings come the end of the year. The expectations were low, and that's fine. We know what they're doing. It's lose it all for Bedard here. So we're talking the teams that we said these guys are going to be in the playoffs, maybe win a division, contending for a playoff spot, something where these teams were trying to get into the playoffs. And thus far are on the outside looking in, and maybe things are looking worse for some rather than others. Justin, where do you want to start? What team? We'll get to all of them, but what team stands out to you first and foremost?
So I had a few teams that I was just like, I had circled and I said, would be a good place to start. But you know what, I think I'm just going to, since you asked, Mark, I'm going to narrow it down to one, and I will start with the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, the Blue Jackets, what were your expectations coming into the year for the Blue Jackets?
For me, the Blue Jackets really, yes, they went out and they got the big free agent acquisition, right? You bring in Johnny Hockey. You've got Patrick Laine extended. You think, okay, good. This team's got a legit shot. They've got a good rookie coming, a couple good rookies with Cole Sillinger, Kent Johnson. You think, okay, this team, if maybe their goaltending can get it together, right? You think that they can put together some wins. They've got a good enough defense, good enough offense on paper. Everything seems like they could be a bubble team. Boy, was I wrong about that. And I think that's where I kind of had them, right? Kind of a middling bubble team. And boy, they have certainly disappointed. This team looks like they're just lost out there defensively. They can't, obviously, Merzlikins can't seem to stop a puck. And I kind of feel bad for them because, boy, they lead the league right now as far as goals against are concerned. And second.
Tied with L.A., right?
Well, no, they're second behind L.A. I'm sorry. They're tied with Anaheim for second.
No, L.A. 33, Columbus 33 goals against, both of them.
No, L.A.'s got 47 goals against.
What?
Yeah, I'm looking right at the standings on NHL.com. It says goals against 47. So
weird. Did I just have? Was I just looking at non-up? Yep, was just looking at standings. Oh my. Oh yeah. Okay, I was just sorry. I'm the worst human. I was looking at. I have some tabs still open for. Yep. Okay. See, I have two standings tabs open. One is from now, and the other one is from last week when we did our show. Like, damn it! No, they have the moat. Yeah. Okay.
Well, at least you admitted it, right? So no. Okay. So they're tied for second in goals against, but I mean, listen, again, I figure this team defensively on paper looked all right. I mean, between Zach Werenski, and the rest of that amazing cast back there. I'm just kidding, not amazing, but granted, again, Gudbranson was a bit of a head scratcher signing, but you figure between Jake Bean, some of the younger guys they have coming up there in that system, Andrew Peak, maybe if you want to throw him in there, you figure they could get it done. And I figured Elvis Merzlikins, wasn't the worst goaltender last year, but he certainly wasn't great. And I figured, he was in a prime position to bounce back. I figured Korpisalo, again, would have an opportunity to bounce back this year. And granted, he hasn't played yet this year, but, he would be primed for that being in a contract season. So, right now it just, it doesn't look good. They've got Tarasov who, again, 5 games, almost 3, a little over 3.5 goals against average. It's been hard to watch. They just look lost. They look like they're just skating around in circles out there.
Elvis Merzlikins is dead last in the NHL for goals saved above expected, and that is a minus 8.7 goals in 7 games. Every game he's giving up an extra goal. I mean, that is just going to torch you. And out of those 7 games, only one of them. Only one of them was considered a quality start. The only goalie with more really bad starts, which is, it's funny that there's actually a stat, really bad starts, but
I do like that.
Thatcher Demko and Martin Jones both have 3, whereas Merzlikins has 2 of those too. So things are not looking good for the Blue Jackets. I'm not putting it all on their goaltenders. I know.
No, but I think
he's having a rough start, but
yeah, I think you look at Vancouver when Quinn Hughes has been out, and again, Columbus, right? Same thing. They have that star defenseman back there, but I think when those guys aren't there, or for instance, Zach Werenski's not playing well, it shows you just how bad the rest of this defense is. And as a team, right, they don't have a system in place that really supports when your star players are out. Like for example, with Boston, right? They lose Charlie McAvoy, and again, they have more talent up front and better goaltending, but still they have systems in place to kind of help keep the ship afloat.
Yeah, Boston's like the opposite. Everyone's injured, and they're the best team in the NHL. They've been hands down. In my opinion, I know that Vegas is tied with them for points, but Boston has just been hands down. They've been the best team in the league so far. Through 10 games, absolutely. They have been unbelievable. I mean, Brad Marchand comes back and gets 3 points in his first game, and then I know they give him the day off. Like, they're not going to play him back-to-backs, I think, until it sounds like until at least after Thanksgiving, but maybe even longer. And from my perspective, you're sitting at 9-1. Why not? Why? It doesn't matter. I think at some point we'll get to the point where we start to go, do we really need to play our star players every single game? And those back-to-backers could get interesting eventually, just like we have with goalies. But I digress. Boston's been really good, quite the opposite of the problem the Blue Jackets are having. But the Blue Jackets just have not been able to. I mean, Laine only playing 4 games so far. He was hurt early on. That doesn't help. What this team does, I don't know. I mean, do you think 10 games in that Gaudreau's regretting leaving the Calgary Flames for this mess?
I don't know if he's regretting it. I think you have to be realistic, right? When you sign up, right? You have to look at this team and you say, okay, cool. Jack Roslovic and Boone Jenner are your top 2, centers, right? So realistically, that there was no expectation of them having a top line center to feed him the puck. So you think, okay, cool. You know what? This team's not going to compete for a Stanley Cup. They'll compete for a playoff spot, right? I mean, that had to be his expectations coming in. You think, as Johnny Hockey, I would assume, just say, hey, you know what? I'll give him a little boost offensively. And
I'm sure everyone like someone of his caliber thinks I can go to that team and get them into the playoffs.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Absolutely, perhaps.
But
again, I think realistically he has to know that, again, the goaltending wasn't that good last year. So, you hope that you can, add enough to get them in the playoffs, at least to where, Maybe they make a move for a center, or maybe this offseason, they go and sign a number one center, and then they're ready to compete, right? So maybe that's your expectations if you're Johnny Hockey. I think, again, he hasn't been all worldly. He hasn't been,
no, he's been
amazing.
Fine. Yeah, he's been fine. He's just out there on an island. Something that is, I know it's early. I know we're only 10 games into the season, but it is interesting to note that there is not another team in the Eastern Conference that has a losing record at home. Only the Columbus Blue Jackets have a losing record at home. Literally no other team is even 500 at home. Every single team is above 500 at home except the Blue Jackets, who are 2-4 at home.
That's crazy.
And I was noticing that, outside of even some really bad, like, team, that means that teams' away records are bad, and they are. Pittsburgh,
right.
Pittsburgh 3-0-1 at home, 1-4-1 away. Like, that's a different team. Toronto 3-1 at home, 1-3-2 away. I think what it tells me is perhaps maybe by the end of the year we're not looking it up. Again, Ottawa Senators 4-1 away from home, 0-4. So I think probably at the end of this, you look back and you go, okay, everything kind of normalized its way out. That's likely where it ends up. But maybe this is something to look a little closer at next year is, through the first 10 games, maybe playing away from home in the beginning of the season is actually harder. Like, it's the time of year where you want to be home. It's still, the things are starting out, school's starting for certain, it's a good time of year maybe to be home, or it's just you got used to not having to travel for a few months, and now all of a sudden you're traveling and you get these big long road trips. You do the California road trip or something early on, and you're just not in the zone yet. I wonder if that's something that we can go back and trace, if it's having an impact early on. Because so far in the standings, it has.
Right. And you know what? One other stat, too, I know I love the fact that you pointed out that they are the only team with a losing record at home. But another stat that I found just amazing, and why I decided I wanted to start with Columbus, was the fact that they are the only team in the NHL that has yet to score on the power play. And you think with the firepower between Voracek, Nyquist, Gaudreau, Laine, they could have mustered one freaking goal by now, but it has not happened.
Yeah, that is crazy. I didn't realize that. Wow, that's. I mean, there is only one team with fewer goals for, and that's the St. Louis Blues, who have played two fewer games as well. But and the Blues have also allowed 14 fewer goals. So, the Blues have. I want to get to the Blues next. Losing their last 5 games. We'll get to them, but yeah, the Blue Jackets. I think for me, the Blue Jackets are worse than they're having a worse start than I would expect. I don't expect at the end of the year for them to have a 300 points percentage. I think what would a 300 point percentage would put them with like less than 30 points at the end of the year, right?
Boy, I don't even know. I mean,
yeah, 30%. Yeah, 10% of 8. It would be 10% of a possible. 30% of a possible 164 points. So that would be like 48 points. Is where they would be at, about 40.
Just crazy.
Under 50 points is what they're on pace for right now. That's just. I mean, and they are like. They have just been bad. The only team with worse is the the San Jose Sharks, who have a 292 points percentage. Anything else you want to say about the Blue Jackets? Is there a way that they can pull themselves out of this? Do you think that they will, or is this what we're going to see through the year?
I mean, I think eventually, with that talent they have, at least at the forward position, I think they'll figure it out a little bit. Whether or not they can crawl back into playoff contention is a whole nother story.
Yeah, I think they're already gone. So
yeah,
I think it's gone.
I would probably I think that
your best bet is to say sayonara to Gus Nyquist and the faster you can ship him off and get as much as possible for him, because I think he, top 6 forward is going to fetch you something pretty good for this upcoming draft, and I think that's where the Blue Jackets should spend their time preparing for the next draft.
Yeah, it's not looking good, and especially, again, if the goaltending is anything similar to what it was last year, it's going to be even harder to climb out of that hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go from the last place team in the Metro to the last place team in the Central. The St. Louis Blues, not the team we expected to be the cellar dweller over here in the Central, and yet they have somehow Arizona and Chicago are just outpacing St. Louis, Nashville, and almost Colorado for Chicago. Or this early on, I think we'll use this time. We'll just kind of sit in the Central here for a minute, because the Central's really, Dallas, I think we all expected them to be there, and really, other than Dallas, no one's played particularly well. I'll say even Winnipeg in second place, they have relied so heavily on Connor Hellebuck that it's hard to say that they've had a really good start. They're 5-3-1. Their offense doesn't look great, but Connor Hellebuck does. So far, if the Jets end up in this position and we keep going the way we're going, he's probably the one winning the Vezina when all is said and done. I know he's what, 4-2, 4-2-1 in 7 starts, 6.5 goals saved above expected, which is good for 6th right now. But I think we're gonna. This is likely the resurgence of Connor Hellebuck, and we talked about that in our preview for the Winnipeg Jets. But on to the Blues. We're talking Blues. What the heck's going on with the Blues? They can't score.
Well, they can't stop the puck either.
There's no goals. They're allowing what? Well, yeah, I guess almost 3 goals a game. But that's not.
It's not anything crazy or outrageous compared to the rest of the league, right? I absolutely agree with you. But, the scoring part, and it's funny, the minute they hand out large contracts to Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, those guys go flat, right?
Those two guys just dried right up.
Yep, I know because I have Jordan Kyrou on my fantasy team.
I have Robert Thomas on 2 fantasy leagues, and he's been absolute garbage.
Right. Yeah. It's rough for sure.
And when you take a deeper dive, first off, I think the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is going to be, well, Ville Husso left for Detroit, who flash up to what Detroit's been able to do so far. I know that they've lost more than they've won, but they are doing exactly what they hoped they would be doing, and that is sitting in a position to contend for a playoff spot. They're doing just that. They've been in almost every game that they've played, and they're playing good enough to win. And Ville Husso has won has he won every game that Detroit's won?
Yeah,
I think so.
Like
I think he's won all the games. I think that Nedeljkovic has lost every game he's played in so far this year. But when you think about the Blues, you got to, first we're going goaltending, because Jordan Binnington has once again been terrible. .882 save percentage. Thomas Greiss, who's obviously playing for the same team, a .915 save percentage. But they both have the same exact goals against. So there's some disconnect here for St. Louis and Jordan Binnington. Did I lose you, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, sorry, I thought I lost you.
Yeah, you cut out for a minute.
I heard a little beep. Yeah.
Oh, did you? So did I. I thought that was just on my end. Jordan Binnington has not been nearly what they needed him to be, right, and what they're paying him to be at this point. And, again, I think last year, and even during our season previews, we kind of talked about how, Husso kind of masked a lot of their defensive I don't know what the word would be for it, but yes, thank you, yeah. Really, outside of Falk and Krug, they played fairly well, but boy, I think, when you look down the line at Parenko, Leddy, and what they have on that back end, at least, by namesake, you figured you'd be getting a lot better defense than what you've gotten out of it. And so, is it the defense? Is it the goaltending? I think it's a little bit of both. And
it's been Justin, it's unbelievable. Jordan Kyrou is a -13. We're only 8 games into the year. He's a -13. And I understand plus minus is not everything that it's not all that it's cracked up to be. But come on, the Patrice Bergeron light, Ryan O'Reilly. He has 1 goal and is a -11. I don't know how the Blues are going to win with any of this happening. Like, it's not as if, and you know what? Some of the guys who have scored for them, like Braden Shen, he's got 22% shooting. Justin Falk, 11.5%. That's not happening for a defenseman. I mean, this is not good for the St. Louis Blues, and it's almost as if maybe this is imploding faster and just more quickly than we thought. I think the loss of different players over the years, maybe this is the culmination of it all. Losing Alex Pietrangelo, David Perron, these older like Tarasenko and Justin Falk, and some of these guys that are perhaps just kind of coming to the end of their effective, not the end of their playing career, but the end of being guys who you can really lean on and rely upon. I mean, it's not happening for this team at all.
No, I mean, listen, when you look at it, right? I mean, when you get past Robert Thomas, who's 4th on this team in scoring with 6 points in 8 games, it drops off tremendously, right? The next best is 3 points. Now, again, Pavel Buchnevich hasn't been there the whole entire season, only 3 games. So I think at some point, right, you might have to look at this, because this is a team that you and I both had in contention for a Stanley Cup, or at least going deep in the playoffs, making a good run. And, the way they pushed Colorado a little bit last year, right. You think, okay, cool, if they can, maybe just take it to, Robert Thomas, Kyrou can just go to another level, and maybe Binnington gets back to form a little bit, right? They could potentially be a threat in the West. And, I think at some point, realistically, you might have to look at this and say, okay, I think they might have in mind who they want to keep, right, as far between Riley and Tarasenko are concerned. But maybe at some point they pull the trigger on one of those guys and make a deal and, say, hey, we got to ship one of them out and maybe try to get a piece back that can, contribute a little bit here, right? Maybe just a change of scenery. Other teams might be willing to take on a Ryan O'Reilly, right, even though he's not producing, and just say, hey, you know what, we're going to slap you in a lesser role on the 3rd or 2nd line and let you, go to work. And I mean, I don't really know how to fix this team, to be quite honest, because again, on paper, everything's there that this team should need to be competitive. And, I've watched a few games, and I don't really, I mean, it's everything. It's not like you can point to the goaltending or the defense and just say it's one or the other, but I just don't think anybody's really cutting the mustard.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider what's happened so far, I mean, my mind just goes straight to the defense, because you sign Nick Leddy to that big deal. It's clear Nick Leddy's not a $4 million defenseman. Not that he's not bad, but he just, I think that he's probably a little overrated in that sense. Colton Parayko, just he's not. I think they were hoping that he could become Alex Pietrangelo light, and he's just not. He has not become that. He's a decent defenseman. He's probably a $4 million defenseman being paid at $6.5 million. And Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, you brought both of these players in to be the catalyst for a great power play. Justin Falk is having a decent start to the year. I mean, he leads the team in points with 9, and also with tied for the most goals with 3. Justin Falk on pace for about 35 goals right now. But you gotta, it just doesn't. It seems to me like maybe the Blues have kind of hit this, all right, we have retooled so many times, and now we put a lot of eggs into the basket of Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, and maybe these guys, they're good. They're good. There's no doubt they're good, but now they're being leaned upon a little bit more with David Perron being gone. I think you're seeing how important David Perron was to this team, to be frank.
Oh, absolutely. And I look.
And we talked about that. We said that it likely is going to have an impact, especially on their power play.
Absolutely. And I think the big indicator for me is looking at the time on ice per game that the coaching has been giving these defensemen and forwards, right? I mean, look, Colton Parenko and Nick Leddy, are playing over 22 minutes a game each. And I think that needs to go down. I think really you need to lean on Krug a little bit more, who's only at 19 minutes a game. Justin Falk at almost 23 minutes, I think that's fine. But I'd like to see less of Leddy, more of Krug. And then, of course, Robert Thomas and Kyrou are both playing 19, 20 minutes each. And I think, again, when you look at a guy like, for example, Braden Shen, who's been playing pretty good, for this team, 9 points through 8 games, play him a little bit more, right? Give him some more ice time, take that away. Give Tarasenko some more ice time, and don't lean on Kyrou and Thomas as much as you have been. Give some of these other vets an opportunity to really, because those are the guys, when you're struggling as a team, right? I look at Pittsburgh right now. They've been struggling lately, ever since that hot start. And I think when you have veteran guys like Crosby, Malkin, for example, here on St. Louis, you have your Braden Shens and your Tarasenkos. You lean on those veterans to help dig you out of these holes because they know what it's like. They've been there. They've gone through these rough patches. And so you allow those to be the players that bring you back out of it versus trying to rely on young guys who just aren't equipped yet to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just have to, you go and you look, it's 5-on-5 is the big problem, right? Like their penalty
and it was
kill,
last year.
Their penalty kill is right somewhere in the middle. Their power play is still a top 12 power play, and at 23%, it's fine. But then you get to 5-on-5 and you go, oh crap! I mean, they're 27th in the league in 5-on-5 scoring chances. There you go. There's your first indicator that things are not going well. That the other teams below them, the Jets, the Wings, the Flyers, the Ducks, and the Coyotes, all teams that we had out of the playoffs ultimately in our previews, and things are just not clicking for them 5-on-5, and I just don't think that they have the horses to do it anymore. I think that a lot of these guys who they've used on their power play, who are effective on the power play, just don't have the speed 5-on-5 to keep up anymore. And I think that that's Tarasenko to an extent. That's definitely Ryan O'Reilly. Braden Shen only has 9 shots on goal through eight games. Yeah, averaging less than a shot per game from from one of your top 6 centers. I mean, it's bad things are going to happen when no one's shooting the puck, and that's
and the one guy who is shooting the puck, Jordan Kyrou, he's tied with Falk for the team lead in shots. He's got 26 shots, but only 3 goals. So it's not working for him. So maybe he needs to, like I said, lessen the minutes.
And some of that can be, I mean, we've seen it with like an Austin Matthews too. There's always players who start the season slow, and that just is what it is. Sometimes you're unlucky, things just aren't going in. And then all of a sudden everything just starts to go in and you score, 5 goals in 6 games kind of vibe, and then you're all of a sudden back on track. And that's generally how it works. But the problem is it's just 5-on-5. There's nothing happening for the St. Louis Blues. I mean, as far like their expected goals for 5-on-5 is 29th in the league. The only teams behind them are the Ducks, the Flyers, and the Coyotes. They are in some unique company for what they've seen, because it's not like the St. Louis Blues to just be this dead coming out. At least the last couple of years. I mean, we've seen them. Hey, the year they won the Stanley Cup, they were last place January 1st, and they won the cup. So, but something that's even more concerning is you look at high danger chances that are leading to goals. The Blues are 8th worst in the NHL. Like, things are just not going right 5-on-5, and it's why the goaltending looks so bad, because the defense is not playing very well either. And I don't know, when Craig Berube won the Stanley Cup in, what was that, 2016 they won the Cup? No, 2017.
Yeah.
And the league's changed a lot. It's crazy, but the league has changed a lot in the last 5 years.
Sure.
And this might be a situation where not just the head coach. Like the head coach was hired for that team, right? Like he was brought in midway through the year, or given the reins midway through the year, and I know he just signed an extension about 9 months ago, but he was brought in to coach that particular team in that particular style, and things have gotten much faster. And frankly, not only from him, but you're looking at the GM, Doug Armstrong, and you're going, I mean, none of what they're doing outside of course, they drafted Kyrou and Thomas, and he drafted them, so good on him. But some of these veteran players that they're keeping around continue to slow down, and it's almost like they're trying to hang on to 2017, and that was 5 years ago. That's like a lifetime ago for a hockey player.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the NHL has always been and probably always will be a copycat league, right? And you look at what's been successful. Tampa Bay, right? The last couple of years, they've had speed, right? That's been, a huge part of their success. But they've also, had the shot blocking and head depth, right? That's what's contributed to their run of Stanley Cup final appearances. But Colorado last year, right? They killed everybody with speed and high-powered scoring. And I mean, look, if you compare that to what St. Louis has, St. Louis definitely doesn't have the speed of Colorado. They definitely don't have the scoring depth that Colorado had last year. And goaltending, for example, too. Even you could go that far and just say, hey, you know what? They're just not getting what Darcy Kemper was given Colorado last year.
Yep. Agreed. Let's just scoot just a little bit up in the Central. We'll just spend just a couple minutes here on the Nashville Predators. Nashville starting off 3-6-1, not a good start. Is this the result of overvaluing all these players that had career years last year, or is this just a blip?
No, I think it's a little bit of a blimp. I think they got off to. I mean, listen, their top players, Ryan Johansson, Duchesne, Granlund, Forsberg, these forwards, they're all playing decent hockey, right? I mean, I don't think, we're going to see, again, a team with a ton of 40 goal scorers on it. But, I think they've been getting some pretty decent contributions from their top guys. But what I think the difference is between this year and last year is last year they were getting a lot of depth scoring. I mean, listen, you had Tanner Jeannot with 41 points. You had Alexander Carrier, 30 points, Sissons. These guys were all contributing both offensively and defensively.
All throughout their lineup, yeah. Right,
yeah, and you were also getting the defense chipping in too. Matthias Ekholm was chipping in on defense, and it wasn't just all, Roman Josi. And I think you look at it this year, right? They just haven't got it from those players down at the bottom of the lineup. And I mean, look, again, Alexander Carrier, no points through 10 games. Dante Fabro, again, a top four defenseman, only 1 point. Ekholm's, again, 3 points in 10 games. So the production isn't there. And I think, again, Ryan McDonough, I give him a pass because I think anytime you step into a new team, a new system, it's going to take time.
Well, and he was you're not bringing Ryan McDonough in to put up big points.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, for sure. So, again, I think, just the contributions from guys at the bottom of the lineup just haven't really been there enough for me. And I need a little bit more, right? If this team's going to be successful, I think the goaltending has also been a little bit suspect too. We haven't talked about that, but for me,
I mean, both goalies are a minus. Well, Lankinen is 1 goal saved above expected, and Saros is 1.5. Saros has started 8 games, so that's
Saros got an .898 save percentage. I mean, that says it all right there. Don't get me wrong, the league average among goaltenders, the save percentage is down a little bit this year, but still for a guy who's supposed to be a 60 game starter, and he's the next Pekka for this franchise, it's just not good enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's an 8 game stretch, right? Like anyone can have a bad 8 game stretch. I mean, you got to love Nino Niederreiter coming in. He's got 5 goals in those 8 games. He's in 10 games. He's played really well. You love to see that kind of production. I think that the St. Louis Blues and the Nashville Predators, even though they're actually St. Louis is in a better position than Nashville because St. Louis has 2 games in hand. I think I'm less worried about Nashville because I think they're still in a position to win. They still have Roman Josi and Saros. I think this is more or less just a bad start. Whereas St. Louis, I think we're seeing something that's been pretty endemic to what they're doing. And last year's catching up with them. Like a year spent being bad 5-on-5 and still succeeding, it's catching up with them now. Whereas Nashville, I think this is just a blip.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing, right? You have to be successful 5-on-5 if you're going to, get anywhere in this league. And, right now, Nashville, I think has I agree with you. I think they have a better opportunity of, closing the gap, especially with Saros back there too. That gives me a little bit more confidence because, he was phenomenal last year and, Binnington was not. And so if you're still getting the same Binnington, I don't have any confidence that he's going to be any better this year than he was last.
Are we giving a pass to the Avalanche, like a Stanley Cup hangover? Are we willing to just extend them that, or are we concerned?
I'll give you a little pass. I think 10 games is okay, but I know through 9 games they've got 9 points and they're sitting at 500. But one thing that does concern me, if anything at all, yes, losing Kadri was a huge blow, and anytime a team has a void at a number 2 center spot, it's hard to continue being successful in this league. But the fact that, as of yesterday, when I looked up the stat, they were dead last in 5-on-5 scoring in this league. Now, again, like you said, St. Louis is struggling, so that this might have changed a little bit. But and it's funny because you look at a team that struggled to score goals last year, the New York Islanders yesterday, I remember seeing they were number 1 in 5-on-5 scoring. So, again, what's going on in this league right now? I don't know, but
things can change 10 game to 10 game stretches.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not as if, Nichushkin's got 12 points in 7 games. He got 7 goals in 7 games. It's not as if they're struggling to score or anything. Like, I mean, Colorado's is averaging more than 3 goals a game, which is about where you need to be a playoff team. I expect that'll go up. I also, the reason I asked if it was something that we're concerned about is because, beyond that top line of Nichushkin, McKinnon, and Rantanen, and I know Landeskog is out, and that certainly is having an impact right now. But beyond them, they're really there's Artturi Lehkonen and Evan Rodriguez, and that's kind of been it. No one else has more than a goal outside of there on their forward group, and this is kind of the issue that Colorado has always had in the past with this really top-heavy lineup where there's a very little depth in the top 6. And I think probably the next team we'll go to, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they're in a very similar boat to the Avalanche, with the Avalanche losing Kadri, also being down Landeskog. That your bottom 6 is just not very good because the top 6 is so loaded with talent. And, hey, that's where you spent all your money. And I can't blame them. It won them a Stanley Cup because they had Nazem Kadri too. But is this going to be a problem?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I think ultimately it will catch up with them. While they might not run away with the division, I think luckily because you are seeing teams like St. Louis and Nashville struggle. Chicago, I suspect, is going to come back down to earth at some point, especially once they start their fire sale and jettison a lot of their talent.
Maybe other teams in the league are like, nah, we're not trading for Kane. This is funny. You guys can't lose.
Oh, that would be terrible. But yeah, I think eventually Colorado will get it. I don't necessarily say when I say get it together. I think they'll start scoring a little bit more, and especially like you said, Landeskog on the IR. I think that's a huge dynamic shift, especially to your 5-on-5 play. I think he adds so much to this team that if you can move Nichushkin down to that second line, that gives you a lot more flexibility. So. Again, I think at some point Colorado will get it together and move into a top 3 spot in this division. I mean, right now they're only 2 points out.
Yeah. It's not as no one's more than a couple of wins out of the playoffs, really. Right,
and I think for Colorado, they're just going to ride this wave. They're going to kind of stay close. They're not going to worry about it too much. They'll get Landeskog back, and if for some reason coaching can't figure it out, they can't. Bednar, if he can't turn this team around and get some depth scoring, I think they will make some moves. Now, unfortunately for them, they don't have a lot of capital to make big moves, right? They don't have any second or third round picks for this year or next. I certainly can't imagine because of that they're going to be willing to deal their first round picks. So, as far as dealing, young talent, they're a little strapped, because I think, again, Bowen Byram is going to be, the prize that I think everybody would want, and Colorado's certainly not dealing him. So maybe you look at a Samuel Girard at some point. Maybe they say, you know what, shoot, we have to get a number 2 center in here, right? It's killing us. We're just barely keeping our heads above water, and so that's the move to be made if you decide you want to do it. But for me right now, if I'm Colorado, I'm staying put. I'm just kind of riding this wave, and hoping that again the depth scoring from some guys, like for example, Logan O'Connor, Evan Rodriguez, I hope that maybe they can figure out and just do just enough, right?
I mean, Evan Rodriguez has gone and scored 4 goals in the 9 games he's played. I mean, he's done fine. That's
but I need a little bit more out of him, right? And Devin Taves obviously hasn't given you the production I think that maybe you were expecting him continue to give you like he did last year. But again, 4 points in 7 games is not anything to bat an eyelash at either.
Yeah, I think Colorado will be just fine. But
yeah,
we'll go across the conference over to the Atlantic, to a team that a lot of people are concerned about right now. They were in almost every preview I saw had the best, at least Vegas odds had the best odds to win the Stanley Cup. The Toronto Maple Leafs sitting in 7th in the Atlantic at 4-4-2, and their old West Coast road trip didn't exactly go as planned, as they lose 4 straight. A couple games in overtime, but blowing the lead against the Anaheim Ducks and almost losing in regulation. Probably should have lost in regulation. Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of at I'll say a little bit of an impasse here, because we saw the bad start last year, and obviously they turned that around. They end up having the best regular season in franchise history. So there's definitely something to that. But you don't have Matthews coming off surgery this year. Once again, you kind of have Mitch Marner seems to be affected by, I'll say, the negativity happening around the team, and there seems to be an issue between him and Sheldon Keefe, and we all know what happens when if you have to go Marner or Keefe.
Right.
I think it's going to be Marner and the Toronto boy, and but I don't think that we're firing. The Leafs aren't going to fire Sheldon Keefe for a 510 game start. I don't think that's the issue. Obviously, I mean, I've watched every game, but from your perspective, what's the issue here? What's the big glaring problem?
Well, first off, let me just say I haven't watched nearly every single game, but what I have watched, to me, Mitch Marner has been the most consistent player for this team.
He's been fine. He's been fine.
Yeah,
I would say that Nylander's been and Tavares have been quite good.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, your top guys are still producing good enough.
Yeah,
right?
everyone's basically producing a point per game that's supposed to.
Right, and that's the thing. The difference is when you look at last year, right? Austin Matthews got off to a hot start, just scoring 100 goals in 5 games, and so I think that's where the difference is, right? You're just not seeing that goal scoring from him that you had last year, and I didn't necessarily expect it. I think I put him somewhere in the 45 to 50 goal range. Again this year, that I thought realistically would happen. I was hoping that, again, William Nylander would take another step and John Tavares would, help out with some of that goal scoring. But, and again, I think when you look at what this team has as far as depth-wise, I think to me the biggest concern is on defense, right? Morgan Riley's been doing his part, but when you look past him, I haven't really been that impressed with what the rest of this defense has been able to do. And so, I don't know if you could just point to one particular player, or if you just say, hey, this is a coaching issue, right? I think,
I think you're definitely seeing the lack of training camp for Rasmus Sandin. He's not looked the best, slow out of the gate, which I think, it just is what it is. That's what happens. yeah, is it Mark Giordano, he's been I'd say that he's been disappointing so far. I mean, he's really the guy he's a +6. He kind of leads that, but I've seen him make some mistakes out there. I just think, without Jake Muzzin, this is what it comes down to. It's 10 games. It is what it is. There's been maybe some stupid things that have been said that it just shouldn't have been an issue. It's clear that their bottom six is not going to score a goal. That's just what it looks like every time there's anyone out there that is not the Matthews line and not the Tavares line. It doesn't look like anyone can score. You've got David Camp, who's got a few goals, and Yarncroke has 2, and then beyond that, there's really nothing. When I'm watching, I know Pierre Engvall, he's got 1 goal. When I'm watching Zach Aston Reese and Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and these players that in the preseason and for what they do, they look effective. They go in and they forecheck and they're fast on the puck and they're annoying to play against. But holy shit, they are never going to score a goal. They don't look like they are even capable of scoring.
Well, yeah, and the other thing for this bottom six is it keeps changing all the time. Last year David Kemp was always that third line center guy. He always was, playing those defensive minutes, and he was very successful at it. Yes, his wingers changed every once in a while, but I think there was a lot of consistency on what he was, producing because he was consistently playing on that third line with similar wingers. Now,
with Mikheyev,
and I think this year you look at, again, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, those pairs have pretty much stayed the same, but their left wingers have swapped pretty much every other game. I feel like I watch, and there's Bunting's up there. Oh, now we've got Robertson. Oh, now Kerfoot's up there, right? And so it keeps changing. And I think if you want to help with consistency,
Malgin's playing with them now. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and I think again, if you want to help develop these other players outside of those 4 stars on the forward group, right? You need to have some consistency at their left wing side. Give them more than a couple games to figure it out, because again, these 4 guys are all world talent, and guys that are typically on third lines or playing with lesser centers, it's going to take them a hot minute to get up to speed and think at the same pace that those guys do.
Yeah. Well, you just wonder, Michael Bunting was with Matthews and Marner all last year, and things went very well for him. Obviously, 63 points, 23 goals. It's not as if he's not playing terrible, but the results weren't there early, and I think that maybe Keefe kind of hit that panic button a little too soon and is hitting it a little too soon in game, right? Like you're midway through the second period and you're already tinkering with your line. So I don't disagree. There's some of that. There's also the issue with that floating winger on the Tavares Nylander line, and it makes me wonder, should you split Matthews and Marner up and have Matthews playing with, just start to kind of rearrange things here and see if there's maybe Matthews is so good. Does he need Marner to be on his wing to be able to be effective? Can he be effective with others and be a play driver? Same with Marner. Marner may be thrown in at different parts of the lineup. Maybe it's just like you can spread out what you have right now, because there just is not very much depth, and you're paying these guys so much, and that's the reason there's not depth. So it's such a hard balance. You've got 4 all-world talents, and outside of that, it's like piecemeal.
Yeah,
and now this could all turn around. The next 10 games, they could win 9 of them. Right? It's not as if this team is horrifyingly different than last year. The goaltending has been great. Samsonov, a .920 save percentage. When he's playing, things are good. When Eric Kjellgren's playing, things aren't good. He's been horrible.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? You look at a lot of teams. You look at, for example, what a team like the New York Rangers went out and did, right? They got Halak. They got Louis Domingue. A lot of teams are investing a lot of money in that number 3 goaltender because they realize injuries are going to happen, and we need a guy who can come in and play those number 2 minutes and be productive for us, right? And I think that's one thing, again, Toronto's Achilles heel has, for the last couple of years has always been, people have looked at goaltending and said, we need consistent goaltending. We get rid of Anderson, we get rid of, Mrazek, we get rid of, Jack Campbell, and so they bring in Samsonov, but they just didn't really invest in a number 3 goalie.
Well, Shalgren is their number 3 goalie.
Well, right, but again, he's not an established number 3. Like when I say number 3,
but they don't have the money to do it.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Who would you bring in to be their number 3?
Well, you could go out and go get, you could have gone out and got a league minimum guy.
That's better than Shalgren.
Oh, like I said, Louis Domingue would have been better than Shalgren in my opinion. I would have, went out and got him, or maybe even tried to, bring in. I don't think Thomas Greiss would have taken a two-way deal.
The problem here's the problem too is you're talking about we're coming out of this is like pulling it out of the hockey world. We're coming out of COVID, like all the craziness, and I think there's a lot. I think there are way more players that go, fuck, I'm never playing in Canada. I mean, if I were in the NHL, I would not play in Canada. I don't want to live in Canada. But based off of what just happened, I wouldn't want to go to Canada. I'd be like, I'm going to go to Florida, which is where he went. And that I think that absolutely plays a factor. It's the whole, hey, we don't want to play in Toronto, and particularly Toronto. I think there's guys that don't want to play in Toronto at all. So it's not just a matter of like, well, why don't they just give that guy league minimum? Well,
oh sure, yeah. You don't want to deal with that market.
He might not want to go there for league minimum, but he'll go to Florida for league minimum because he actually makes an extra $100,000 because he doesn't get taxed as much.
Right, and doesn't have that media to deal with either. Yeah, I completely get it.
Braden Holt is a free agent.
Well, yeah, but does he want to play, right? But, right. For example, you could go out and, I don't know how you'd, fit this in with your cap, but, a guy like maybe, so, for example, I look at
well, they do have cap space right now because Muzzin, from what I understand, Muzzin may be out for the entire year.
Yeah, maybe you make a move at some point.
You've got $5 million.
You go get Anton Khudobin, bring him in right from Dallas. I know, again, they've got injuries they're dealing with Ottinger, but, I think they would like to move his contract off the books right now to get that 2.2 that they're currently paying him, and maybe you have him be your third goaltender, right? I think
I just don't think they're going to spend too much time in it and resources on bringing in a third goalie when, like, yes, Shalgren hasn't been good, but Matt Murray will be back. Samsonov has been really good. He's been completely fine. And the biggest issue is that Jake Muzzin, your top 4 defenseman, is out and possibly for the rest of the year. So you have to take his $5 million that's available. Now Liljegren's going to come in when he comes off LTIR in a couple weeks. 1.4 million will go there, which will help the defense in and of itself. I mean, Liljegren was an effective player last year, but they'll need to weaponize that extra $4 million in cap space and go out and bring in a defenseman. Like, for all the talk of a goalie and the lack of forwards in the bottom 6, this is probably really comes down to the lack of another defenseman who can move the puck and really drive things from the back end. Like, you've got Morgan Rielly, TJ Brody doesn't make a mistake. He makes like 3 mistakes a year. He's so solid back there, but he's not going to produce offense for you. And that's kind of the same as Justin Hall. Justin Hall's very similar to TJ Brody. He's not going to make tons of mistakes, but he just isn't going to really move the needle for you the other way. And that's where you're hoping that Rasmus Sandin can develop into an offensive defenseman. And he has been slow out of the gate. And so I think really what you got to do is go and get that defenseman to replace Jake Muzzin. And make find a right shot defenseman, probably. Because the left side seems to be a little jammed up. And that probably means that Justin Hall is bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of issues like we talked about, the bottom 6. There's issues on defense, the backup goaltending position. So there are a lot of issues with this Toronto team, I think, that They can only score their way out of so many of those problems, I think. And right now they're just not doing enough scoring to do that. But luckily for them, I will say, they're in a division where Ottawa hasn't impressed as much as I thought they would. Montreal, again, they'll hang around, but I don't think they're going to be super competitive the entire season. And, Detroit they're a 500 team. They are what they are. And I think, Buffalo's pretty much in that same category. They're a little above 500. And,
if Toronto goes into, or Philadelphia comes to Toronto tonight, we're recording this on Wednesday. The Leafs win that game, and one win ties them for a playoff spot in this division. Jumps the Florida Panthers for fourth, and suddenly, they're not in a much different position than the Panthers. Or really the Lightning. The Pittsburgh Penguins are sitting 4-4-2 as well. I don't think that anybody is like, oh, the Penguins are garbage. Like, they're undefeated at home. They're 3-0-1 at home. They've gotten a point in every game. And I think this is just the road trips early on. There's something to them. I remember last year too for the Leafs that they did an early California trip, and they had a poor showing at that as well. And I think we're only 10 games in. And for a team that had 115 points last year, that isn't much different than they were. Like, Matthews is going to be fine. Marner's going to be fine. Matthews is shooting 6.3%. So that's what is he? Career 16% or something like that?
Yeah, those top guys are going to figure it out.
So, if he was shooting normal, he's got 4 more goals. and if he has 4 more goals, that might be 2 wins. And then you're looking at it and you're going, well, the Leafs are 6-2-2 and no one cares, right? Like, that's just how razor thin all these margins are, because really, you can have a year where things just don't go in as easily for you, and it really kind of throw off a lot.
Yeah, so let me ask you this question, because I know this is the $1 million question with this team right now. If you're talking panic button, because again, I do think, like you said, those top 4 guys are gonna, get a little bit better, improve a little bit more as the season goes on, and so they'll help contribute to a few more goals and a few more wins for this team. But at some point with the defensive struggles and the issues with the backup goaltending and depth at the forward position on that bottom 6. Do you maybe have to go out at some point and you say, we want to cut the head off the snake now and fix it? And you go out and you bring in a guy like Barry Trotz.
I, of course, know that, Barry Trotz said that he wants to coach an original 6 team. So he was definitely putting it out there. It's 10 games in to where, like, no one's getting fired for a 500 record 10 games in. That's just, we're not there yet, because they could win 7 of their next 10 and then suddenly, and then everything's okay. I don't think that Kyle Dubas is going to be offered the ability to fire Sheldon Keefe. I think that he is going to, this is Keefe and Dubas all the way. If Keefe gets fired, I think Dubas will get fired too.
So here's what I will say about that, because I kind of agree with you to the fact, because it's well known that, Barry Trotz wants some sort of upper management role, right?
Yep.
And so, if Sheldon Keefe, if Dubas brings in Barry Trotz, he's got to say, well, this guy's clearly gunning for my job, right? So he's not going to bring in a guy like Trotz, who's there to take his job essentially, or is looking at that position, right? Because, again, that's basically writing on the wall. So I think the only way, right, I think that this Barry Trotz comes in anyways, at least him, Shanahan take over, and you have to fire both those guys, right, mid-season.
Yep. And there would likely be a plan. I think wherever Barry Trotz goes, there's going to be a plan in place for him to become the GM.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like I think, quietly, Lindy Ruff, is looking over his shoulder because, Brunette was brought in secretly because I do think there was a plan in place when you bring in a guy like that to say, hey,
and secretly the Devils were like, actually, we're just going to be great.
Right. Yeah. We're gonna rope a dope you. We're gonna suck for a couple games, make you think, Andrew Burnett's taking over, and then we're just going to fuck everybody up. So
Yep, exactly.
But
well, I'll say this just to close out our show today, that even it is early, and that we're not at the place where we can go, oh, look at the standings now, and it'll be the same come playoffs. We're not quite there yet, but the crazy thing is we will be in like 3 weeks.
right.
Come Thanksgiving. I mean, it's what, like, I think per conference you're looking at probably 7 of the 8 teams are decided, and that those teams will be the ones that are in the playoffs. So we're 3 weeks out, and in those 3 weeks, you're looking at basically another 10 games. And if we're still sitting looking at the standings the same way, then I think that Sheldon Keefe and Dubas might both just get fired. We might just say, let's get this thing going and move on. And it's just a matter of, would it happen midseason if things imploded, and is Shanahan the one that they go, we're going to let you keep leading this out? That's the other thing you have to wonder, is that, like, how high up is the restructuring of this team going to go? And I don't think anyone wants to go there, because things are so, like, I think the whole Matthews has to re-sign in Toronto, or heads are going to fly everywhere. Like, that's the number one priority. Keep Matthews for all time. Him and Marner. And you do not want this thing to fall apart. And
Matthews doesn't re-sign, what do you think Marner's going to re-sign the next year? No.
Well,
probably not.
Yeah, I don't know about Marner.
So then shit's hitting the fan at that point.
Yeah, which, it's funny how 10 games later you can go from blowing the whole thing up to, actually it looks like they'll probably win the Stanley Cup. So that's what I'm banking.
Yeah, I can't wait to revisit this again in 3 weeks, and we can talk about who's real and who's not.
Yes, exactly. All right, well, that's our show. Find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, you have a great night, and to our listeners, thanks for being here. We'll talk to you guys soon.